It is an AI, and these days I am often asked, where are your X-Men? So people tend to associate me with some Professor X character, and often ask me what is the latest thing that you teenagers have really invented. So I'm here to not talk about fears, but hopefully about opportunities, and give you some inspiration and hope that if we do things the way we hope we can do things, in terms of inspiring the younger generation, that I really hope then maybe better outcomes will happen. And so, very briefly, so I have been a human rights activist since I was 14, to an extent when I once gave an interview to a Scandinavian magazine. Police came knocking on our door and told my mom that if I ever speak again, then probably unkind things will happen to me and to the family. And bear in mind, we're talking ex-Russia, so I'm from Uzbekistan, Central Asia, so I do every now and then wonder if there is any poisoning in my tea when I drink it, but the hoping is that it won't happen. But yes, I've been talking about human rights and women's rights for a long time now. So my sort of academic background is mixed. So I studied economics for a bit, then transferred into studying business management because that was more fun and more practical. And then eventually I ended up studying politics and IR at LSE, and resulted in war studies at King's College London. So it's a very eclectic mix, over-academized. But it's an interesting one because it offered me lots of opportunities to travel the world, consult, and see the world as it is. So just now I came from a very interesting panel led by a BBC journalist, and the audience was actually elderly people over 50, 60, and there were some real fears, and we ended up talking about China and the geopolitics and world order. So my background came very, very handy there. But these days, what I do, and it's something that I came across quite by accident, really. It was a very accidental thing that happened. One of my teenagers back in 2017 was feeling very suicidal and tried to commit suicide 6 times before he came to me and asked me for help. He just asked me to engage his mind. He said, just give me something to do, because otherwise I don't know what my mind, what I can do to myself. And this was a very bright teenager, the brain that I have not encountered now. And I work with a lot of people and meet some very, very intelligent young people, sometimes boys and girls age 8 and 9 who already know their linear algebra that come and find me. And so this young man, he was only 16 at that time. He was diagnosed with depression and suicidal, and what happened was I was desperate to find a way to occupy his mind, and the one thing I knew he was passionate about was artificial intelligence. Now, he was only 15, 16 at that time, and I asked him, okay, well, I don't know what to do with you, because all I do is I run hackathons and I inspire kids, and we do some really wacky things during our hacks. So why don't you organize one on artificial intelligence? This was the first AI hack that we did. That was back in 2017, and it was a hack on mental health. That seemed to have occupied him for a few months, organizing this, and he brought some incredible speakers and mentors into this hackathon. Right now, well, later he ended up being one of the youngest members, being a teenager at the IoT lab at King's College London. Right now he's also my co-founder, and he lately spoke at ICML and NeurIPS, so he developed some really advanced algorithm, and the boy is only 18. So what happened after? A year later, I decided, well, AI seems to be really interesting for teenagers. It seems to really keep them away from being suicidal and whatnot. So I decided to launch a movement at the United Nations, and it seems to have been endorsed by the UN. A lot of interest came about from corporates, as large as Microsoft. So we've done some work with Microsoft and MasterCard, and recently with DeepMind and HSBC and IBM. And everyone is really fascinated by the fact that teenagers can really, really understand AI and create AI, and they really care about what's happening in the world, and they really do want to address those problems. But The title of my talk was from sort of Alice to Wonder Woman to Professor X, and that was really the wonderland that I've had when I was growing up, which really was something that pretty much had, well, quite a huge influence on what I have become, because growing up in Bukhara, in this magical place, you didn't really have any opportunities. So my first interaction with a computer was when I was 18, completely self-taught, self-learner. But one advice I do remember that my mom gave me, which was when I was about 10, is she said, if you learn English, the world will be your oyster. And so I embraced those words, learned to speak English in order to wander around here and interact and understand the foreigners that were coming to visit this magical place. And that was my way to actually gain an understanding of what is happening in the world. And some of the interesting conversations I've had were about, inequality, about poverty, about what's happening in my country, which is not something the government would ever reveal to us. And so a lot of stuff was happening there, and it's only much later that I realized that the most impactful times that I've had were when I was a teenager and when I was a child. That led me to embrace some of the international opportunities, living, not just traveling, but actually living for at least 2 years in every one of these places, which were the Balkans, Ethiopia, Bangladesh. And in fact, some of the worst human rights abuse was probably encountered in a tiny area in Bangladesh, which nobody even knows about, called Chittagong Hill Tracts. And when I was there, we witnessed famine, which was manufactured by the government. And the world was watching, like they're watching China abusing certain populations of China and doing absolutely nothing. So, but somehow it just all happened. Opportunities came forward. I couldn't say no to some of them, and I ended up eventually speaking in various conferences, really talking about how desperate we should be, and really we are, about various systems such as education system to change, probably drastically, in order for us to see any real change in skills and talent. And that is probably why I'm here, because I did wonder why Robin brought me today. So 1 billion young people will start the work, and Economist says that there will be lots of jobs that haven't even been invented and they don't even exist. So Royal Society says that there will be more than 1 million jobs available, engineering and tech professionals required in the UK. And really, it's not going to happen. So this is what we need by 2020, but we don't really have the skills and the talent to fill those jobs. And this is really serious. So World Economic Forum says the top skills are problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, the stuff that unfortunately is not taught in schools, because in schools we still are taught knowledge-based subjects. And when it comes to kids working together, it's called cheating, right? Which is a shame. So, and if you're lucky to go to a really cool private school, then obviously things are different. But fortunately, I work with the majority of the kids that come from underprivileged backgrounds, ordinary schools. And you know what? I can see a huge, massive difference between kids that come out of private schools and kids that come out of ordinary schools. And these are the skills that most kids lack. I mean, kids from private school, they're a bit more confident, but still, nobody knows how to work with one another. The job landscape looks like that. So a lot of jobs using, obviously, the jargon that we're seeing here is not even mentioned in schools. So a lot of kids come out of schools, they have never heard about AI, machine learning, data science, data analytics, you name it. So many kids still go to school thinking they will end up doing jobs in, being a lawyer, being a teacher, being a doctor, not realizing that every single one of these jobs will be penetrated by technology one way or another. And so 100% net new jobs are being created in Europe, or have been created in Europe in the past 5 years. They were the companies that are less than 5 years old, and the trend is ongoing, which is very interesting. So in my mind, how, and this is something I'm really concerned about, how will the next generation answer the question, what will you do when you grow up? which is a classic question we ask, which I think is a wrong question to ask, because the question to ask is, how are you going to change the world, of course? But 40% of the jobs, have not been created, and 100% of those jobs that come from the companies that are less than 5 years old. So, I wonder how many of you have known what kind of jobs you will have had when you left school. Probably not many of you would have known, and you would have changed many jobs before you've ended up where you are right now. So the situation is quite drastic. I will be giving evidence in Parliament on Monday about the skills in education, what is really needed. And I'm concerned, I'm not really the only one concerned. And we criticize countries like China, for instance, a lot, and there is a really good reason to criticize them. But one thing I've noticed with China is when they say they're going to achieve something, like they're going to dominate the world by 2030, they actually create a very interesting plan. They start with education. So for them, it's a long-term investment, and they actually teach AI in primary schools, believe it or not. So this is interesting. So obviously myself and some other people who are motivated by similar causes, we are on a mission to change, to inspire young people to change the world. And the good question is, why AI? And I feel, and this is my obviously sort of theory of change, if you would like to think of it this way, is that if we were to inspire them or instill into them certain values where they can be empathetic, where they can really care, and where they can see the world as it is, and hopefully address those problems. If we could teach them how to operate with technologies, then maybe there will be the world will be a better place. So I don't know. This is something I will be obviously testing, but we do have some stats that and some impact that we have been evaluating when 4 years on, and we have teenagers who really are creating the algorithm that could be profoundly, life-changing. We've got the last slide that I hope I will be able to show you is a tiny girl who is only 12 who is developing something called Doctor AI, and that is a tool for doctors to use within their medical practices, or doctors, clinicians in big hospitals who don't really know how to do AI, but they have to hire data scientists and analysts. But the kids are developing the tool for doctors to be able to use in order to avoid those kind of expenditure, which is really exciting. So when I see kids who are trying to create algorithm that helps you self-diagnose skin disease, or an algorithm that helps a teacher diagnose dyslexia from a very early age, that's exciting to me. So when I see a teenager who we've got based in Nigeria, who I will show you a slide of, who has been asked several times by the Nigerian government to create an algorithm to skew elections, and when he says no, thank you, I feel really proud because he's my mentee. It doesn't mean to say someone else won't say yes, they probably will. But the hoping is that if we could inspire and show them the potential for technology and how they can influence, and also hopefully influence their values collectively, then the world will be a better place. And so I'm sure you have seen some of these faces, and this is again something that I have been watching, this trend of teenagers, activists, who have been doing some phenomenal things. Obviously the latest one being Greta here. Follow him on Twitter, he's incredible. He will be leading the accelerator with me last 2 weeks of August. And Elena just now has won a Space UK competition because she managed to create a tracker that tracks all of the trolleys. Apparently people leave trolleys, and that creates a lot of waste. Now, I didn't know that. So she managed to create an algorithm that helps you track those trolleys. She won the Space UK competition and even managed to bag £7,500 by winning that competition. So presented in lots of conferences as well, including AI World Summit in Amsterdam, in COGAC several times, and one to watch. And she's only 16, by the way. And this is the boy that I've just mentioned who lives in Nigeria, who is actually at the moment is co-organizing with me a Teens and AI hackathon for the first time in Africa, which is really exciting. So anyone there who's really concerned about diversity and racial bias. So this will be a really interesting one in Africa, happening again at the end of August, alongside deep learning in Daba, which is an annual thing that DeepMind and Google and Microsoft are running together collectively. And so there are just 3 of them that I brought with me, but obviously there are thousands of them, and right now across the world. And we have just about figured out how we're going to scale in impact, which is something that we've been thinking about, because it's not really easy to scale an impact first business, but we somehow have managed to figure it out. So I'm hoping we can show this one. Amazing. All right, so I want you to all say ow in the end, because this is so cute. And I think, yeah, so shall I just press?
Hi, I'm Nia Hickman, and this is Dr. AI. So what's the one thing that doctors all have in common? Well, with every patient they see, they get a lot of data, and they don't always know how to interpret it. With all that data, it's easy to see why doctors may have varying opinions based on their experiences. And we found a way to help doctors seek out the best solution. Doctors don't know how to code, so they need to hire data analysts. But data analysts are expensive and don't necessarily understand the language used in medicine. So the solution is Dr. AI. So how does this work? Take 2 doctors, one with data and one without data. They both use Dr. AI to translate their medical language into a tech language. And this then goes into a library of AI, which the doctor uses to create an augmented diagnosis. So now I'm just going to quickly sign in. And then the AI asks a couple of questions. And I have the option to drag in some files. So we do have competitors, but ours is better because it's cheaper, faster, code-free, focused on the medical industry with its own medical library. And what about the cost? Well, we have the potential to save both doctors and patients a lot of money. And all of this adds up to be a better experience for everyone by helping achieve a more consistent diagnosis, helping to improve a patient's survival, and by integrating data between hospitals. We can help increase the evolution of medicine.
So
the time for all doctors to act is now.
Yes. So yes, and this really is something I wanted to conclude my keynote today, just to show you that, you know, girls like this, they start when they're 12, 13, and when they're age 15, 16, you just can't stop them. And what I really learned is when we inspire them with the most incredible stuff, you know, that's done either by Microsoft, for instance. Seeing AI is really mind-blowing, for instance, and some of the other stuff that DeepMind is doing, or other incredible companies, then all needs to happen then is for them to hear you all speak and inspire them, and then they go ahead, they go home, and they figure it out. So something I wanted to end my keynote is I do sometimes wonder whether we need to teach code the way we do, because every single teenager that comes or actually leaves our hackathons, they're all self-taught. Now, nobody will tell you, well, I learned that from my teacher, I learned Python from my teacher. They all are what we call bedroom coders, or they are all really good at Google, and they really do figure it out. Once they are inspired, once they get the inspiration, and once you show them the potential for technology to change the world, they get so blown away, they are wild, they figure it out by themselves. During our accelerator programs, we have a rule: first ask Google, then ask your friend. Thank you so much for listening to me.